Perfect. Wonderful. I know it's just now noon for me, 10 for you, Sarah.
Yeah.
So we can wait just a couple more seconds, see who all we have join us, make sure that everyone can log in and hear us and all of that good stuff. And then we can go ahead and dive in and talk about Giving Tuesday and impact and how to convert more donors online. So something that I'm sure all of our attendees will really enjoy and hopefully reap a lot of benefit from this year.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It is. It's
Feels
exciting.
like only yesterday we were talking about Giving Tuesday from last year, so it's coming around quite.
I can't believe it's already October. So
yeah,
crazy. Awesome. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. We'll also record this. So for anyone that can't be here live, we'll send out the recording, or anyone that wants to revisit this and take away some of our key notes can revisit the recording as well. So that's great news. Feel free to share this recording with your team if you find it super valuable. And then one other item you'll notice at either the top, but probably the bottom of your screen, that you see a chat and a Q&A. So at the end, we will do a Q&A. Feel free to pop any questions in your Q&A box rather than your chat box, and we'll address those at the very end of the presentation. So with that being said, we're all super excited to have you here. We're grateful that you signed up for the webinar, and we hope that this is a super valuable presentation specific to Giving Tuesday, helping your organization highlight its impact and convert more donors through your online fundraising forms. So with that being said, Sarah, I'd love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sarah Stritch. I am the marketing manager here at iATS Payments. We are an exclusive nonprofit payment provider for the nonprofit industry. Before this, I actually worked in the nonprofit industry myself. I worked for a children's charity here in Vancouver. The accent gives me away. I'm not actually from Canada. I am Irish, in case anybody is wondering why I sound strange. And yeah, I am super passionate about helping in the nonprofit industry. When I moved out of that space and into the space where we could still support the nonprofit industry, has been great. And Giving Tuesday is one of my favorite things to talk about throughout the year. There's so much opportunity and, you know, so much great things that can happen around that time. So I am super excited to be here with Lauren today.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. It's great to have you, Sarah. We're excited to it'll be a webinar, but a little bit more conversational, and hear about iATS payments by Deluxe and some of the phenomenal things that organizations can do through their online donation pages for Giving Tuesday. So as Sarah said, my name is Lauren, and I am one of the co-founders of Social Impact Solutions. Our team really focuses on helping organizations measure and market their impact. So we're going to talk quite a bit about impact today, how you can incorporate that into your Giving Tuesday campaigns, and make sure that you're hopefully increasing online donations by highlighting your impact metrics and clearly communicating to your donors. So with that being said, let's dive right in. We will talk about what impact is, why it's important. We'll focus a little bit on the marketing and fundraising side specific to Giving Tuesday. And then Sarah is going to bring in some really great key tools and tips to focus on. Even if you're not using iATS payments as your online donation form, you can definitely apply these tips and tricks to other organizations or other fundraising platforms that you might be using. So let's go back a slide. There we go. It skipped one. Let's start with why your impact is important. So in the nonprofit sector, I don't feel like you can read a single article that doesn't mention something about impact. So it's definitely feeling like a buzzword, a buzz topic. But the reality is that funders, individual donors, granting organizations are not only requesting impact data, they're demanding it. And so we live in a time where, you know, donors don't necessarily just want to give to something that makes them feel good. They genuinely want to know what change or impact is being created along the way over the long term to the communities that you're serving. So here are some statistics, some surveys and reports that have come out stating that a large majority, 97% of major donors, look at impact as the number one reason why they give to an organization, which means you have to measure your impact in the first place to then communicate it back to your stakeholders and your donors. About 66% of funders really look at positive outcomes. So in a couple of slides, we'll talk about outputs versus outcomes and measuring change over time. And then younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, likely individuals that may already be donating to your organization, but definitely future donors, as younger generations are really wanting to see social change proven through impact metrics. So these are just a few reasons why measuring and marketing your impact is so valuable. And you can definitely incorporate these into this year's Giving Tuesday campaign if you haven't already. So Sarah, when I use the word impact, what comes to mind for you specific to the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's sort of like impact is the main ethos of why we give, and it's so important to understand that like every impact in every nonprofit is different. Like what it looks like to you guys all looks completely different. So when it comes to mind, I always just think of like why are we here? Why do we do the things we do? Like why is it important that we exist? That our impact helps X. Why are we doing these things? So yeah, as we go through these slides, each of you will see impact differently than another, but it is super important to understand what it is that you're doing in your community, right? Like what is the impact you're giving, and why is it, why are we doing it? What does it provide for us? So yeah, I just think of like, everyone has a place in the nonprofit community and where their impact lies. And so, yeah, it's super, super important that everyone in your organization understands the impact that your community is getting from your services. So that's sort of where I would come in from the angle of impact. Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, impact certainly matters to any nonprofit that exists, whether you're advocacy, services, no matter what. But no matter what you do as an organization, there are some pillar components that apply in helping you measure your impact. So obviously, every nonprofit has a program or multiple programs or an initiative as sort of your flagship cornerstone, the reason that your organization exists. And then you have outputs, outcomes, and then long-term impact. So we'll talk about all of these components in the upcoming slides, but really simply put, impact is really just measuring change over time, right? And like Sarah said, every nonprofit is doing some form of good in the community or communities that you serve. And so measuring that change, recording that transformation, and then reporting that information back to your donors and other stakeholders is truly invaluable. So programs and initiatives, we won't spend too much time here on this slide. I think everyone on our call probably has a really good feel for what their programs and initiatives are. Again, no matter if you're focused on services, maybe it's mental health services or advocacy and awareness or fundraising and capital campaigns, or maybe you have some of all of this going on within your one organization. Programs and initiatives are probably the main or one of the main reasons that your donors and stakeholders are really attracted to your organization. So that's where we'll start, is with a particular program. And then you want to start to look at your outputs. So outputs are typically pretty easy to measure. You might have a food and nutrition program, and you can tell your donors how many meals you've provided, right? Number of meals provided, that is an output. Or if you're focusing on maternal health services, number of people served is an output, or number of dollars raised. So this is super valuable information, and your donors definitely want to see this, but we don't necessarily want to stop here. And that's what a lot of organizations do. They just report back, their output metrics, and donors want to know more. Sarah, how would you say that you've seen outputs really nicely outlined on an online donation form in the past?
Yeah, like everything that I'm probably going to reiterate this about 1,000,000 times in this, but it's keeping it so simple. It's like when you know that your output does like a particular thing that you know that is going to be a compelling reason for those people to donate, you make that your like your statement, your headline. You use it as the reason why people have landed on this page, right? So, you can put all your different outputs on all different online forms and donation pages, right? So like to keep it really clear, if you are driving people to want to like that, if you want people to donate to a particular thing, a particular pillar of what you're trying to achieve, make it super clear that that's what's happening, and make, everything super clear, not just the headline, but like the giving amount, like if, like what you said about like mental wellness services, if, a counseling session costs whatever amount, if it's $100, say that like $100 is going to get somebody this. And so when you're making that super clear to people, it makes it far more compelling to click the button, so that you're saying, actually, yeah, that makes sense. $100 is attributed to that particular service. Yes, I want to do that. So that you're being super clear and really upfront with your supporters about where your dollar amount, where their dollars are going, what are they helping? And if it's that particular niche thing that you provide and they want to know that's what they're doing, then let them do that. Give them the tools to do that. Be super clear. Yeah.
Such valuable insights and feedback. Yes, to be clear, to be simple. Sometimes we can get so caught up in the work that we're doing, the program we're involved with, the organization that we started or we're overseeing, and we can get so into the weeds and confuse our audience. So taking a step back, even having potentially, outside consultants come in and provide a fresh, more simple, but still highly valuable perspective, phenomenal. And definitely doing that on our fundraising pages and Giving Tuesday pages as well. Awesome. So these are outputs, super important. Again, you can start measuring this day one. You can start telling your donors, hey, we only have 10 people in the program now, but our plan is to have 10,000 by the end of the year. Outputs are super valuable, but again, don't stop there. Definitely take it to the next step when you're measuring your impact and focus on outcomes as well. Outcomes are going to be more of your midterm, long-term results where you're really starting to see change over time. So if we're going back to a maternal health program, we have 500 mothers in our program. That's fantastic. But what change is actually happening for them over time? Maybe they're in rural Haiti. I've been to Haiti. I've genuinely lost count how many times. I think it's 40 plus now. And in a maternal health program, these women, they now have food, which is invaluable for their own health and the development of their unborn child. They now have access to medical care. So what do we start to see over time? Even in a month's time, 3 months' time, we see them start to gain weight. We see them start to have improved lab values. Their quality of life is starting to improve. So these are some of the things that can be short-term, midterm, and long-term outcomes. But again, we have to measure it over time. I personally think that healthcare, public health, education are some of the easiest things to measure, just because you can look at lab results. You can, if you're talking about education, you can look at, test rates and passing scores. But absolutely, we can look at economic change. We can look at policy change. We can look at advocacy and awareness too, when we're talking about outcomes and impact. So all of this is incredibly valuable. Let's hop over here and look at just this chart. Some people like to see this broken down visually. So these are just examples. On the left-hand side, we have programs and initiatives, outputs, outcomes, and then our long-term impacts. So again, there's an example for an advocacy for homelessness. Advocacy and awareness can be a little bit more challenging to measure, but it can still be done. You can still talk about dollars raised. You can talk about number of issues addressed long-term, or it typically takes years. So I would call it long-term impacts of advocacy and awareness would be policy change. So actually looking at what the awareness that you raised, what is it doing over time? What's leading to policy change, whether that's local or national or international potentially. And then we have a couple of other examples for food distribution and health screenings. Again, I'm a little bit biased. I focus a little bit more on the nutrition and healthcare and public health side of things, but truly any program can be measured in some form or fashion. So some of you on this webinar might be thinking, well, this is a lot for me to do before Giving Tuesday. And that's okay. You know, if you don't have enough data, if you don't have the time to get it together, somehow Giving Tuesday is less than 2 months away. But Sarah, what would you say, just looking at this chart, outputs, outcomes, and impact, just some key components that can be put on an online fundraising form for Giving Tuesday?
Yeah, so like what I said before, it's really, excuse me. Sorry.
You're fine. I know it's fall and sniffles and coughs. It's that time of year, so no worries. That's okay.
No, sorry, I'm back.
No, you're totally fine. I felt the same way this week.
Yeah, it's getting into the fall. So, yeah, like I said before, it's super important that when you're addressing having your outcome as a part of why they do what they do. So, you know, you have your impact reports and stuff like that. A lot of people do them throughout the year, but make sure that you're using the same language in email marketing campaigns. You know, tell people that this was the goal we had last year, you know, for last year's Giving Tuesday, or end of year giving is a great time for this too. So, you know, we like exactly what you said, Lauren, like if we have X amount of people signed up for this, or we have X amount of, you know, meals provided, we want to get to our goal, have goals around, like orientate around that, because it makes people want to help, especially if the goal is very achievable. Like I always think coming into Giving Tuesday, if, you know, you want to get like, you know, 5,000 meals given to, you know, given by the end of the year, and you're quite close to that, that's a really good way to drive people to want to do good. You know, like by the end of the year, we want to achieve this goal, we need your help. Be super clear about that with them. Like you can use that as, you know, email marketing content, you know, get them involved, ask them to be involved. It's also a really good way of going out to social media and being like, hey, like we want to reach our goal, you know, to people that may not even know that you're trying to achieve this particular goal, and get more people in, you know, try and get more people invested in your nonprofit by the end of the year. And who knows, if you can capture them in that way and get them a part of something, like make them feel like they're a part of this particular goal, then at least then, you know, you're running the good risk of getting people turned from like one-time giving into recurring donors, which is, you know, which is the biggest drive that we can get. Getting more recurring donors is always a positive. It's always a good thing.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely agree. Fantastic. You know, communicating this in such a clear, compelling way, bringing people back into the bigger picture, the specific goal. And then, like you said, Sarah, helping those individuals that maybe have already given once really feel compelled to give on an ongoing basis is certainly an invaluable metric and conversion for any organization, as far as any that I've been involved with. So I think that's all super helpful feedback. So now that we've talked about impact, and we're all using the same language, you know, we're not just using impact as this vague word that we see everywhere that might have, you know, 10 different definitions. Now that we're all on the same page, I'd love to talk a little bit about marketing your impact, and specifically focusing on the marketing and communication component. Up at the top here, you see several ways that impact metrics and impact data can be used in a very valuable way in your marketing collateral. So communicating your impact data, whether that's verbally or in written form, again, first and foremost, you have to have that data, you have to have those metrics, but whether that's saying, you know, in an email, number of people served, you know, percentage of people that have seen improvement, or again, with advocacy and awareness, you know, these are the number of issues that we have addressed, and here's the long-term change that is happening because of what our program or programs are doing. So again, just communicating it, you know, don't assume that even your employees or volunteers, but definitely your donors. Don't assume that they know these things. You have to tell them, and you have to share it in a very clear and compelling way. Also, don't at all hear me say that stories are null and void, because donors, stakeholders, foundations even love to hear stories of transformation. The stories are what really make it personal. They can put, a face to a name to a face. Or maybe it's not an individual, maybe it's a family that is highlighted in a story. So definitely still use stories of transformation in your marketing collateral, but just use greater impact data, sort of programmatic impact data to back it up too, right? So we can talk about, that we served, 100 women in our maternal health program this month, but then we could highlight a story of, we'll call her Sally, and putting those two together is where the marketing side of impact is really, really powerful. Also, be sure to highlight this information on your website, right? What better place to showcase this information than on your website? Again, if it's just a section sort of toward the top or the middle of your website, highlighting some of your impact metrics. And then Sarah alluded to an annual report a moment ago. Definitely having an annual impact report is super valuable. You can update this year over year. You can, increase the metrics that you're putting in there. You can update it from 2022 to 2023, but definitely having an annual impact report that goes out to your donors. This can also live on your website for new donors to access as well. And you can even use it as a lead generating PDF on your website if you'd like to, and capture email addresses through your impact report in that manner too. So those are just some tips for marketing your impact, particularly for Giving Tuesday. And then with fundraising and impact, very similar to what I just said on the previous slide, but for your development team, definitely making sure that they're aware of the impacts that your organization is having, that your marketing and development teams are using similar language and working together to, increase donations, increase conversion rates, right? You don't want your marketing and development teams to be siloed. So whether it's donor scripts, online donation pages, and even your board, you can always put your impact metrics into your fundraising and development efforts too. I think board members can be some of the greatest advocates for your organization, but making sure that they're talking about your organization the same way that your internal team members are is super valuable. So, Sarah, I know we've talked a lot about impact, but here, since we're talking specifically about fundraising on this slide, what's just the one key tip you would say for fundraising and impact on your online donation page or form?
Yeah, I would say one of the critical things that people sort of leave as an afterthought that I think is super important is making sure that the thank you pages are well set up, so that you're saying, this one particular part of, like, if you're donating for this reason, this is why you're putting all this great effort into getting people to this point where you're telling the story. And then there's a bit of a drop off, like people want to be thanked and, like to feel like they're a part of it. So, and it ties back to Lauren, what you were talking about with the website and everything else. Like, it's super important to communicate with these people as much as possible and like in the most effective ways. So, obviously, like with, post Giving Tuesday or any campaign, there should always be a plan in place for good stewardship, making sure that these people feel thanked for the online form part. There is automatic replies that you can set out. Like, you don't have to obviously thank these people individually, but there's a couple of things there in most of these CRMs that are, in most of these cases, you can set up automatic replies, but making sure, like, if you have a particular online form that speaks specifically to, like, one particular thing, make sure you're thanking them for that. So thank them for the thing that they gave to, basically. So yeah, not to forget those little details at the end, because those little details are things that will hopefully in turn encourage people to want to support the organization again.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, obviously, thank your donors, It's not that's just, it doesn't always happen, shockingly. So
It does,
something
yeah.
as simple as saying thank you is so valuable. As a matter of fact, and this is a true story, last Giving Tuesday, one of our clients, they did a fundraising campaign, as they always do, and through automated systems, they sent thank you emails and thank you so much for your donations, and then sent some updates later on as to what the Giving Tuesday donations were accomplishing. But they had a donor come back to them a couple of weeks later and said, I get emails from multiple organizations and I donate to multiple organizations every Giving Tuesday, and this particular organization is the only one that I got a thank you from. And so
Right.
even though
Yeah.
it wasn't a personalized thank you, it wasn't a handwritten card, it was an automated email.
That's it. It can be something that simple. And like you said, like, Giving Tuesday, end of year giving, it's frantic. It's, we're all trying to get everything done by the end of the year. And it is such a big time. And like, to echo your point, Lauren, like when I worked in nonprofit industry, those little things were what mattered, because there's so much noise around Giving Tuesday. Everyone wants their organization to stand out and be the one that, is the champion of Giving Tuesday and wants people to donate and do all those good things. But it's where you will really catch people is in those smaller efforts that don't require a lot of lift, but it's just a matter of making sure it's put in place before you execute your donation pages and your email marketing campaign. So yeah, I found it's always been super important, and people really like bond with the organization with little things like that, which is, huge.
It's truly invaluable and priceless. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Super, super important. So I would move on to this slide and say another tip that you don't see here is definitely send your thank yous, plan your thank yous. So thank you for mentioning that, Sarah. But these are just 4 straightforward tips that we have that we hope will help you succeed this Giving Tuesday. Do your very best to focus on one initiative. Sarah will probably talk in a little bit about having multiple online forms. So if you're fundraising for multiple initiatives, have separate forms for those. So I'll let Sarah talk about that more in a little bit, but definitely focus on one initiative per page or form as to not confuse your donors. Don't give them too much information on one web page or one donation page. Define your outputs. So again, if you don't have a lot of impact data, that's okay. You can still use what you have for Giving Tuesday. So at minimum, tell your donors on your online fundraising form, we're fundraising for our water well initiative, and we currently have this many wells drilled. We're currently providing this much water to this many people, and here's our goal. Right? So whether it's by the end of this year or maybe you're gearing up for 2024, inform them of what your goals are through outputs and clarifying your outcomes if you can. If you don't have outcomes for this Giving Tuesday, that's okay. But definitely put it on the calendar as something to work toward in 2024 so that you can highlight that in your 2024 fundraising campaigns. And then the last one we have here is ideally you have one call to action, right? So on your donation form, you're not asking the donor or potential donor to do too many things. If your goal is for them to donate to you and give you money, then say that, right? We don't want to ask them to call us or email us or, find us over here on Twitter or blog or whatever. If you're asking them to give you money, just say donate here as your single call to action, or donate today, or you can change up the language a little bit, but just make sure it's one single clear call to action. So those are our big tips for Giving Tuesday. If you feel like wow, it's already October, Giving Tuesday's right around the corner, and you need a little bit of help with your fundraising initiatives toward the end of the year, take our free fundraising quiz at fundraisingquiz.org. It's a free assessment. It'll probably take you 3 to 5 minutes to take it. And this focuses on marketing, organizational clarity, fundraising, and impact. So hopefully this will help you to see where your organization is really shining and doing a phenomenal job, as well as maybe some areas that you might want to improve on for end of year fundraising or the start of 2024. So head over to fundraisingquiz.org, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you And we're going to talk a little bit more about fundraising forms and online conversions.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just share my screen.
Perfect.
So, okay. Can everyone see that? Can you see that okay, Lauren?
I can. It looks like we're not fully in presenter mode. So I can see other slides down at the bottom too. But I can reshare if that's easier.
Actually, yeah, maybe you should reshare because I think this
Sure.
is, yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem at all. All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So when it comes to donation forms, yeah, we see these all the time with our own system that we have in place, that, you know, people can get super bogged down with, you know, a lot of different features. And, you know, it is important that we're sharing stories for Giving Tuesday and everything else. But Laura made a really good point a few minutes ago by saying, you know, try to keep it to one like clear initiative. If your organization is somewhere that has a couple of different things all going on, you know, and you want to get the word out about everything, you can still do that. But I think the best way of doing that, keeping it simple and splitting the donation forms can sometimes be the best way to go. Not only because it keeps it really clear and clean that you can focus on one particular thing. For example, when I worked at a children's charity here in Vancouver, we kept all of the pillars of support, as they call them, separate. So one was for mental wellness, one was for education, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of your supporters will want to support different causes, right? So by doing that, if you replicate your pages and then send them out in that way, like if you know that there's a particular focus of your donors that want to support mental wellness, you can send them that particular form. And like what I said before, make the call to actions really clear. The donation amount, how many mental wellness counseling sessions it gets, you know, per child, or whatever metrics that works for you. And as Lauren said, keep it so simple. Like, don't make the call to action convoluted. Like, it needs to just be as like donate today, all that good stuff. Also other things that people get bogged down with is like branding and stuff like that. Like if your organization has really strong colors and tones and stuff like that in your typical marketing campaigns, it may not work and translate on donation forms. So, you know, having dark backgrounds, having a lot of images, having video content, stuff like that can take away a lot of the time from what you're really trying to do. Your goal is to get people into these forms and get them to donate as quickly as possible, give them the information they need to have. Images are fine, and, you know, as long as they're optimized, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but, you know, keeping it really clear. What are they donating for? What is it? What's the purpose, and how do we get them to donate as quickly as possible? So, you know, another thing that we've seen couple of organizations that we have do is, you know, some of our clients have given an option to guest checkout. So, you know, instead of filling it out, you know, a fuller form, you can always give a guest checkout and keep the email address there, so that these are people you can contact after the fact that, you know, they might be one-time giving people that you might then go, okay, well, we have a collection of people that gave on Giving Tuesday. We can actually now send them an email correspondence to see if they'd like to become a recurring donor, or they'd like to support us again for an end of year campaign. So those fields, you know, are still giving us the information we need to get, but in a much shorter and simpler way. So sometimes that can be a nice option to give your donors. And as we've talked about impact, we've talked about this a lot, but it is really important that, you know, you're incorporating you in this, like not to get lost in, you know, the Giving Tuesday. There's a lot of language and there's a lot of focus around what they're saying and what other nonprofits are saying. And be very intentional that you're not saying what everyone else is saying. Stick to like your mission, your nonprofit organization, and making sure that, you know, you're aligning everything together, that you're not going completely off the script when it comes to Giving Tuesday, because you want people to recognize that it's you and it's your organization. You know, and with that being said, it's, you know, your donors are your people that are, particularly your recurring donors, are your people who arguably will know you the best outside of your organization, right? And outside of your board members. They are advocates too. So like if you're giving them all the information and you're being very direct with them, then it gives them the opportunity to reshare your message, right? Like on social media or whatever. You know, it opens up a whole nother avenue for your story to be retold, not from just your voice, from people who actually either impact or who like to make an impact with your organization. And like that, like if you have your like impact image, like if you want to use an image, make sure that it directly aligns with what you're asking for. So, you know, you will always have your regular, you know, banners for, you know, your regular organization banners. But if this is for a particular ask, like Lauren's, really good example of like, if it's wells, like make sure that it directly aligns that. So that's what people see when they land on your page first, that they know, oh, I know that I'm donating to this, basically. Accessibility is something as well that's super important. And, you know, like that, like backgrounds, layouts, all that stuff is really important. But like coloring, making sure that you're sticking with not only your brand, but also that it makes sense. Like make sure you're testing these things out first, right? So when you're making your forms, make sure members of staff, send them the links, make sure that it makes sense to them, make sure that there's nothing kind of funny on the page or that everything is very clear. So make sure that when you are executing these campaigns and any online form, no matter what time of the year, make sure that you're testing them and that people know that, you know, you're using these, this is for a particular reason, and that it makes sense. Because sometimes I know myself, I have created hundreds of online forms, and you really do get bogged down with like, this is how it should be, but from the outside perspective's eye, it might not make much sense to the general public. So just keep in mind that testing these things out are super important. And as I said, like videos and stuff like that can be very problematic. Even if they're like super impactful, you can always keep them for something else. You know, you can always put them on your homepage, you can share them on social media and then direct them to the page. Keep the page just super clear. And character restrictions is something else as well. Like if you do want, some people do and some people don't, like if some people want to leave, in particular cases, like a message for people that they're supporting, right? So I know from working at a children's charity, some people wanted to leave messages of support for certain children that were going through, you know, difficult times and all that stuff, and they wanted to give messages to the family. You can always add that there. You can keep it to something else, but like so long as that it's really clear and it doesn't take away from the actual give itself, well then yeah, just make sure that you're not restricting people from, you know, putting in certain messages and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's so, like Laura and I both said, it's stuff that's super simple, but like we forget about it when we're in the trenches, right? And I've been there, I've done it, where I've like get these great ideas of like, oh yeah, this sounds really good, but actually it might not be as accessible you know, to everybody. And, you know, which brings me into mobile friendly is something that goes overlooked time and time again. This is something that, because we're not working on our mobile phones, well, most of us don't, we work on our computer screens, right? So we forget that there is a whole other way of giving, and that there's a whole other portion of people that prefer to do things on their phone, or, you know, they're on the go, and making sure that we're making that as easy as possible. So there is a, I left a link on the slide, but I will enter it into the chat. You can, Google has a test your page for mobile friendly. So when you are creating these pages, this is a really good tool to have, just to throw it in and be like, let's see what it looks like. It will give you feedback. It will show you what it looks like. And so that you can see yourself from a fresh pair of eyes, what it looks like. You know, and like, simple little things. The form obviously is going to be, the screen size is a lot more narrow. So just making sure that you're recognizing that you don't want too much things to get to the point. You don't want to end up being like, it takes so long for them to scroll to hit the donate button. So, you know, making sure that it's not cluttered up, that the speed is good. Again, this is something you can test yourself and get other colleagues to test. You know, again, I'd avoid, you know, videos, pop-ups, anything like that. And just making sure that like, and it's something as well that people forget, that when we are creating these pages for mobile, to remember that the buttons need to be bigger, that, you know, it's not going to be as easy for everybody to see, you know, on their phone, like, you know, people with visibility issues, other kind of things like that. Make it super, super obvious that this is what you're trying to achieve. And yeah, like these are just things that, you know, we can all take on board when we're going forward. We go to the, is there enough? Yeah. This is another thing that we you know, we deal with all the time. We are a payment processing company. So, but yeah, having multiple options is really, really important. You know, not everyone wants to give in the same way. Not everyone has the option to do one or the other. Like, and like I said, with things like digital wallets, having that as a part of your options is really important, right? Because if somebody's going through and they want to give on their mobile phone and they don't want to take out their card and you don't have your payment set, you know, a lot of people have their digital wallets on their mobiles now. So, you know, using your phone as, you know, the direct access into these people is really important to remember. Not only that, like, they can fill in the form, but they are being given the option to make a payment in the way that they want to, and that's easiest for them. So that's super important too. So yeah, we touched on this as well. This is a point that I live and die by, especially when I worked in the nonprofit industry. We seen how impactful it was when, you know, little touches were made after the fact, you know, sending emails after the fact, the auto replies, the, you know, a little e-card just to say like, hey, like, thank you so much, and those kind of things. And it's also opportunities to get these people to further come on board with your organization. And it doesn't always have to mean that they become a recurring donor, right? Like, these can be people who are just advocates. They like what you're doing. They like your stories that you're sharing. So give them the opportunities to do that, right? So like, have your social media content ready to go, you know, encourage them to share. Always make sure, and it's something so simple, but like, you are reaching out to these people, whether it's on the phone or in emails, always say like, hey, listen, like, if you're on social media and you see something that like we've done that you're, you know, that you like, please share it with your, you know, your family and friends, and like, you know, raise more awareness of what we're trying to do. You know, let these people be your biggest champions. Mailing lists are can be super helpful too, especially when you have a lot going on in an organization. Like, some are a lot smaller than others, but if you have, you know, a lot of things that you'd like to share to get help with, whether it's calling out for volunteers, you know, events that are coming up, different initiatives that you're trying to, you know, get across the board. Having a mailing list is something that can be really beneficial, and making sure that the content in that benefits everybody, right? So that, you know, you've got clear call to actions in there, you know, an opportunity to put in another donation form, but also another opportunity to just keep sharing your message and keep reiterating the story, as we've said a couple of times. And like that, like, when, you know, people feel more included and more involved, you know, I know a lot of organizations, for their monthly giving, anyone who signs up, there can be initiatives, you know, whether it's like tote bags or water bottles, or like small things that make a huge difference when people, you know, take these things out and about. They see like, oh, that person supports that organization. Oh, that looks really cool. Or, you know, these really small touches. Early access to events, I always found, was an interesting one, because, you know, if you have events that are benefiting people that, like, you know, that they get super excited about, you can actually create a lot of noise around these things. And, you know, giving them early access makes them feel that just like a little bit more important. So small little touches like that, I think, really make a difference. So my takeaways with all of this really is, you know, keep it as simple and streamlined as possible. Accessibility is super important, and I can't stress that part enough. Before actually we hopped on this, Lauren and I did speak about we here in Canada, we have such a multicultural city in Vancouver, especially. You know, we have a lot of people here who are not native to Canada, not native English speakers. So you know, one of the things that we tested out in the organization I used to work for was we made sure that pages were optional to be translated to things like Mandarin or French, which are two languages that are spoken a lot here. It makes people feel super included, right? So like, that they feel like they're a part of, it's not just, you know, native English speakers or people who are from, you know, the cities or the countries that they're living in, that everyone feels super included, that, you know, there is another option for, you know, people who are visually impaired. Your website is optimized for that, or people who, you know, have any sort of like language barriers, anything like that. It made it super helpful when we had people trying to fill in granting forms, that they were able to translate those. And so granting forms, online forms, you know, anything like that that makes it easier for people to give or for people to get help and support, making sure that you're remembering that accessibility is such a massive part of getting these people the help they need first and foremost, and second, to get the support that they need from people. So yeah, accessibility is one I'm super passionate about. And then keeping your form like organized on the mission. And we've talked about this before, but I'll just sum it up again. You know, tell people exactly what you're doing, tell them what the need and the ask is for. And the more honest and open you are with what you're trying to say and what you're trying to ask, the more receptive people are going to be with, one, giving, and two, sharing your story. And then track the performance. So like that, if you have multiple online forms, you know, you can track, you know, their open rates if you use them in different particular emails. So if you want to focus on one particular pillar in one email with one form versus another, like there are opportunities that you can do making multiple forms. But like performance wise, and you know, Lauren there was a graph at the start of this that really explained this a lot better than I will. But you know, tracking your performance over time and giving yourself like those, you know, short-term goals and the longer-term goals will really help you understand where you are as an organization. And if it's a short-term goal that you're still trying to achieve by the end of the year, you can roll out your Giving Tuesday campaign to an end of year giving campaign and, you know, use that language to really drum up the support. But it's super important to look back and reflect on all the good work that you have done over the year and over the past couple of years, and learn, like, where did we excel? What area of marketing worked best? What language that we used? What, you know, what online forms worked the best? So, you know, looking back and reflecting, and I've worked in the nonprofit industry. I know how hard it is to like hit the stop button and look back over your shoulder because you're constantly running forward. But I would say taking that time is super, super important to make sure that everybody is, one, on the same page, and two, that you're constantly learning from what you're doing before and improving all the time. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Such valuable tips and tools for end of year and Giving Tuesday fundraising, particularly with online donation forms. So I feel like there's been lots of valuable insights as to how to clearly and communicate in a really compelling manner to donors through online fundraising forms. I hope that everyone on the call has been taking notes and feels like this has been super valuable for them as they gear up for Giving Tuesday this year. So we have about 13 minutes left. Sarah and I would love to take any questions in the Q&A box. So I will go ahead, and I think we have one last slide here. Again, oh, this is just highlighting again the fundraising quiz. If you didn't get a chance to jot this down, the URL is just fundraisingquiz.org. And again, hopefully you'll just find this as a helpful, valuable tool as you gear up for Giving Tuesday. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
I'm actually going to share as well the link to, if anyone wants it, to the test the mobile friendly from Google. I'm going to put it in the chat in case anyone wants it. I find that's always really helpful to just make sure everything is ready to go. Perfect.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Yeah, definitely be on the lookout, or I see the link here right now. So yeah, check out that link, and definitely optimizing mobile forms is probably one of the most valuable things that can be done. So a couple of questions that we have, and any other questions that anyone on the call has, please feel free to put those in the Q&A box, and we'll address those in the next few minutes. But one of the questions is just, what if I don't have any impact data? And so we did touch on that in the webinar briefly, but that's okay. It's, as Sarah said, you know, it's hard to stop and pivot and reevaluate as a nonprofit organization, whether it's funding restraints or personnel restraints or both. And I know that it can feel like a lot to add to your plates to measure impact and actually keep track of all of the things that your donors and granting foundations are requesting of you. But again, start with your outputs. You know, at minimum, know the number of people that you're serving, number of dollars raised, number of, you know, again, if you're providing food, number of meals provided, or number of water wells drilled, or number of trees planted. So start there and start with outputs. And then from there, take it on to outcomes. And this is where surveys can be really helpful to start to capture outcome data. You can ask your constituents what changes they're experiencing over time. You can do that through survey form, you can do it through interviews or focus groups. So those are some great feasible ways to start to measure outcomes. And then you just continue to test and iterate and continue to measure over time, ideally for a couple of years, 3 years or more, to start to see those long-term outcomes. So that's definitely one that plenty of organizations can struggle with. Another question that we had is how to check if forms are mobile responsive. And Sarah, you did talk about this, and then you did just put that link in the chat. But were there any other tips specific to optimizing mobile forms that you had, or do you think that that link pretty well sums it up?
I think it does. And I just think like it's what I said before. It's like, stepping outside of, we look at screens differently than most people do when they're like out and about and on the go. So just like be mindful of the fact that like, if this is something that you can read and that you like, would you give to this? Like, looking at it properly. And I always think testing these things out in the office, like when, I know everybody's busy, but like testing them out among the staff is the best start to go, because you're going to have people who are like Android users, Apple users, open different browsers, all these different things, and you have the data right in front of you. You can just like do it really quickly. The last thing you want to do is to, send it out, get this feedback, and, have people calling the phones and like, adding more pressure to the team. So, testing them out is just like a true and tested way of, you're annoying your members of staff a little bit, but it's definitely worth doing, so that, it's the same with iPads, you know what I mean? We have, there's a lot of people who use iPads and, rather use them when they're at home as well. So like making sure that they're obviously optimized too. And like, it all falls into the same thing, but, just being mindful that everyone likes to give in a different way and that you're just covering all the bases. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. We also had another question that just popped into the chat. And so Dean is asking, is there a site that explains what you mean by forms, how to generate them, and where they are housed? Each a separate web page, things of that nature. So Sarah, I'll definitely pass that off to you. Would love for you to just talk about iATS payments and really, a little bit about what you are about, and if someone needs help with online forms, and where they can find resources.
Absolutely. So we are we're a payment processor, but we also have we call it online forms, so the donation pages that you can generate and you can create so that you have a platform for giving. So in the nonprofit industry as a whole, like there's a lot of different CRMs and different sort of fundraising tools that are on the market. Our one that we have that we discuss is Deluxe payment platform. So in that, it's a CRM that you have an option just to click into online forms and they generate out a donation page, so that you can keep them all together in one place, you can consolidate them all together, and that you can see the donation amounts attributed to each of them. But basically, it's a tool as a part of a feature of any sort of fundraising CRM, will have the option to generate out donation forms as a part of their software basis, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Another question that we have is, what if our impact measurement finds negative outcomes rather than positive outcomes, right? And so a lot of times that's a fear and maybe even a reason that organizations don't measure their impact. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite examples, just because it's a large, well-known organization, is Tom's Shoes. So back in the day, I'm not sure, 15 plus years ago, they used to do what they called a shoe for a shoe. That was their whole mission, right? So if I bought a pair of shoes here in the United States, a pair of Tom's shoes, they would give away another free pair. They focused a lot of their efforts in Africa. And that seemed great. They did really well as they're a B Corp now. I'm not entirely sure how they started out. And then they started measuring their impact in the areas where they were giving away their shoes. And they found that they were creating cycles of dependency. And it was actually not all that glamorous. Sure, maybe they were helping in some ways, but they were also hindering in others. And I'm not throwing them under the bus. They've been public about this. But they were transparent with their donors. They went to their donors and they said, hey, like what we thought was going to work, it's actually having some repercussions that we didn't foresee. So we're going to pivot. And now they focus predominantly on water wells, and they've completely changed their model. And because of their honesty, their transparency, and their willingness to completely pivot how they function, they've continued to grow and thrive. And so I'm not at all saying that, you know, that's what will happen. I'm just giving somewhat of an extreme example where they didn't fail at all. They just had to pivot. And that's what donors want. They want to know the positive outcomes. They also know that not everything can be 100% positive. So they want to see where are some areas of improvement as well. So don't be afraid of having some less than ideal or even completely negative outcomes once you start measuring your impact. And then one more question that we have, just quickly, we have a couple of minutes left. Sarah, things to avoid on donation pages. I know you talked a lot about what to include, how to optimize. Are there a couple of key things that you would say, you know, absolutely, it's just not worth the time or the read to put this on a donation page?
Yeah, video is probably the bigger one. It just takes up a lot of space and a lot of speed will go into that. So like I would avoid that at all costs. And I would also suggest like avoiding like backgrounds that are really busy and like, you know, dark, you know, features and anything that like, you know, you think, oh yeah, like we can share this like really nice photo. Again, there's always places for them in other places. I would say just keep it super clear, like a very brief kind of like what, you know, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to give. Like images are perfect, so long as obviously that they're optimized and that, you know, they're not too big, they're not taking over the whole thing. Like banner images are usually quite good for this, but yeah, just sticking to the point. And the other thing with like the CTAs and the buttons and the giving amount, making sure that they're super clear as well, because when they get confusing, like silly little things like keeping them in order of amount, you know, things like that. Like even having, if you want to say like $100 means this to somebody, like say that, like make it really clear, just so that you're not confusing anybody. And, you know, we just want people to have a really good user experience and get through as quickly as possible, right?
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been great. I hope that everyone on the call has found it to be incredibly valuable too. We wish you so much success in your Giving Tuesday campaigns, and we hope that these tips have been really helpful. Again, this has been recorded, and so we'll send out the recording for anyone that was not able to attend live, or maybe you want to go back and visit and take some more notes or share it with a team member. We'll send the recording your way by this afternoon. And if you need any help with your online forms, iATS Payments is a great place to look. If you need any help with measuring and marketing your impact, that's what our team at Social Impact Solutions is all about. So we hope that these are some great resources for all of you, and we wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.